how you doing today? Hey, one of my favorite things to do is to take old favorites, comfort foods, things that I've always loved and used to enjoy, try to repurpose them and reimage them and be keto friendly. And one of my favorite things, when done correctly, is meatloaf. Now, some people have a love and hate relationship with meatloaf, and I do too. I've had some really bad, dry, mealy meatloaf. Luckily, growing up, my mom made really good meatloaf, and I've always liked it. And I've always made really good meatloaf. So I've got a kind of a simple meatloaf, and then we're gonna kind of stop there if you want, but then we can also take it a step further too. And it's kind of, well, we'll save that for a surprise. So obviously with traditional meatloaf, there's milk and breadcrumbs, sometimes just chunks of bread and what's called a panade, where they soak the bread in the milk. And that's what makes it light and tender and all of that. Well, we obviously can't do that. So I have a couple surprises that tries to kind of overcome the lack of the breadcrumbs and the milk. And we'll get going. So basically what I have here in this bowl is a pound of ground beef and a pound of ground pork. To that, I'm gonna add a quarter of an onion that I've minced as finely as I could. And you can either use a yellow or white onion, either would be fine. I have about a half of a green bell pepper, and you guys can change these ingredients up to suit you. Like I'd often put a chopped jalapeno in this. That would be awesome. So kind of whatever you want. You know, if you want some red bell pepper, you don't want any onion, hey, it's your meatloaf. It's not gonna break my heart. Then I have about 2 cloves of minced garlic here. I mince my own. I don't like the stuff that comes in the jar, but if that's all you've got, go for it. And if you don't have any fresh garlic, use some garlic powder. So to that, we're gonna salt it. So we're gonna use, we've got 2 pounds of meat, so that'll take about 2 teaspoons of salt, plus or minus, based on your taste. And then we'll do some fresh cracked black pepper. And that's obviously to taste. I kind of like my pepper on the heavier side. And you do what you need. I'm going to put in a little bit of dried basil. If I were guessing, about a half a teaspoon would work. Again, to taste. And then I'm going to put in about a half a teaspoon of dried thyme. And now the first of the secret ingredients is going to be some shredded Parmesan. And this is going to kind of help bind everything together and hold some moisture. And so I'm putting probably about a half a cup in there. Again, I really cook by feel, so if I were to dump this whole tub in there, it wouldn't be terrible. And then we're going to add 2 eggs to this. And now we're going to mix it all up. Now, I know some people are a little queasy about touching raw meat. I've never understood that. If you want to try this with a spatula, knock yourself out. If you can also get some gloves. But I've got some freshly washed hands here, and so we're just going to kind of work all of this together. The cheese, the eggs, and the vegetables. And we're going to try to make this as homogeneous as we can. And so we'll come back when this is all mixed. So we have this mostly mixed up. It's not quite mixed as much as I'd like it, but we still have the final secret ingredient. And that secret ingredient, it's a little unusual, but we're going to use some green cabbage. Now, I've heard of other people using some pork rinds, and those are fine if you want to try that. I found that a quarter head of cabbage will give this a nice texture. Now the cabbage actually kind of dissolves and goes away in the baking, especially if we cut this fine enough. I'm going to teach you how to do that. So you want to kind of find a medium-sized head cabbage, get all the outer leaves peeled off, make sure it's pretty clean, and then just kind of find a natural flat spot for it. And you want to be very careful. You're just going to cut it right down the middle in half. And then we'll cut that into a quarter. So about a quarter head of cabbage. You can see I'm not quite the exact same size. I'll take the smaller one today. And then it looks like I got most of the core out of that one. So that white's okay to be in there. So now what we're going to do So I'm just going to kind of cut that down into a smaller, manageable size. And with your sharp chef's knife, we're going to just cut that into thin, thin slices. This is also how I would do my my low-carb coleslaw, homemade coleslaw. So this is the exact same process on that. And I'll actually do a separate video on the coleslaw. But right now we're just trying to cut this as finely as we can. If you are worried at all about your knife skills, maybe not too experienced, you can buy the prepackaged coleslaw, or even just this and cut it into chunks, and you can just kind of throw it in a food processor for a second. You don't want to make a puree, but you want it chopped pretty darn fine. And let me see, that might even be enough. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, we'll go ahead and cut the rest just for the fun of it. Make sure let's find a spot for it to stand. There we go. I'm just going to kind of try to shave that as thinly as we can. I'm just going to kind of grab it and then chop it the other way, as fine as we can get it. There's a couple big pieces. It's not the end of the world, but again, you want it to, the smaller it is, the more it all just kind of dissolves and goes away. So any big pieces, you can get them out of there. And then at the end, you can also just do kind of the old chef's knife rock. And again, just going for fineness here. Get this stuff out of the way. And then this goes right into the meatloaf mix, and that looks like it's about the right amount. And then we're gonna go just back to mixing. All right, so we have the veggies and the meat all pretty well mixed here, and you can see it looks like it's got a lot of veg in it, and it does. But again, a lot of this is going to dissolve in the cooking process. There'll be some pieces of veg here and there, and you can alter it again to your taste. So what we're going to do, we've got a sheet pan with some parchment paper on here. Parchment paper is pretty important. Obviously, you can use a silpat, which is the silicone mat. And so I'm going to show you two things we can do here. One is, if you just want to form this into a loaf, and I do like it free form rather than in a loaf pan, because that way you get browning on 3 sides instead of just the top. And you can add the glaze to all 3 sides. So just kind of get that to where it looks somewhat meatloafy. And if you want to stop there, great. You throw this into a 325-degree oven. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to take it another step further. So check this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to just mash this all out until it covers the entire sheet pan. Just work slow. If the meat is sticking to your hands too much, try putting a little water on your hands. But trust me, it will get there. It just takes a little bit of work, but the result is so worth it. Because we don't have the milk and the bread and other stuff in there, we really want to kind of pack as much flavor into this as we can, because it's never going to be quite as moist and tender. This is going to be on a little more dense than the homemade traditional meatloaf. So we're going to add so much good stuff to this that you forget all about it. So let's just keep this spreading on out. I'll show you a trick here. As it gets to the edge, just kind of roll your hand from the center to the edge. And when it gets to the edge here, just kind of fold the paper in on it, and that makes a nice kind of a crisp edge for you. You can do that on all 4 sides. So we'll just keep working this slowly. Try to make it as even as possible. Get it all the way to the corners if you can. It's not super critical, and you'll see why in a minute. But again, the more even, the easier the next step will be. So we'll just keep working. And again, with the herbs, different herbs and things, use whatever you guys like. I would, you know, some oregano's nice in there. If you're going with the spicier version, like if you had put a chili or a jalapeno in here, some crushed red pepper would be a nice addition. And we're just about there here, guys. All right, now let's go wash those meaty hands. So the reason we went through all that trouble to layer this out is we're actually going to stuff and roll this meatloaf with some good stuff. So what I have here is some prosciutto. That's what I decided to go with today. Now prosciutto can be a little on the pricey side. I've also used capicola, or if you're from the East, gabagool. Never sure how they got gabagool from capicola, but that's why they say it in Jersey and New York, if I'm not mistaken. And so what we're going to do here, just layer the prosciutto, or the prosciutto. Keep going until this container has about 3 ounces of prosciutto, which a little goes a long way. But again, I've used, like I said, capicola. Those are the 2 main ones that I've used. Now I've also done a hatch green chili version of this. So I wouldn't use any meat, but I would layer this with roasted hatch chilies and some jack cheese, or in this case, we're going to use some provolone. So I have some provolone slices. This is unsmoked, but if you like smoked, go for it. Mozzarella would be good for this. Any kind of a white cheese that melts well that you like will work. Now we are going to roll this up and make a meatloaf. By rolling it up, what we're technically making is a roulade. A roulade is any kind of a rolled meat. But you'll see here, this is kind of where it's important to have the parchment paper, because it's going to help you pick up the end and just roll it over. I'll kind of hold the cheese in place, roll it, and form it. And then you can come over with this side, roll it, form it. And then we're going to clean up the ends here. Now one thing I do is I kind of try to get this moved a long way. Probably would have been easier just to turn the whole parchment paper. Now you want to make sure that that rolled edge there is sealed well. So pat that down, and then we can kind of reform it so that it's uniform. And now we have a meatloaf stuffed with prosciutto and provolone. And again, any cheese or meat you like, it's something fun to play with, and it just adds another dimension. So this is now going to go into a 350-degree oven. It usually takes 30 to 45 minutes. You want to check it with a thermometer. You want it to be at about 160 degrees internally. And about halfway through, we're going to make a ketchup-based glaze. That's optional. You can either do that or not. I kind of make a spicy ketchup sriracha glaze, and that's coming up in just a minute. So this is going in the oven. All right, so let's whip this ketchup-based glaze together. I have some Heinz no sugar added ketchup. Some people don't care for this because it does have some sucralose in it. So if you want to use one of the other more keto-friendly ones, I'm all for it. So I'm guessing about a 1/4 cup of ketchup. I like a little bit of heat, so I'm going to do, let's say 2 teaspoons and a little extra for good luck of some sriracha. And then we'll do, half a teaspoon of onion powder. and about half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and hit it with a little bit of cracked black pepper. And this will go on the meatloaf about halfway through cooking. So I have it in the oven, 350. I'll put this on at about 20 minutes in, because again, it usually takes 40, 45 minutes generally to get going. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna stir all this together, and that will be the ketchup glaze that is, like I said, completely optional. So, but I like it. And I like the little bit of bite that the sriracha gives you, but I like spicy things. So we'll go ahead and let those flavors meld while the meatloaf's in the oven, and we'll see you back when the meatloaf is done and ready to try. All right, so it's about halfway through the cooking time on the meatloaf. So we're gonna pull it out and throw that glaze we made on it. And now we're just gonna get this glaze going. I like to get it spooned on and then go ahead and get a pastry brush and just spread it around, make sure all the sides are covered. Doesn't have to be exact. And it doesn't have to be a real thick coat unless you want a real thick coat. This is your meatloaf. If you want a happy tree over in the corner, you put it there. All right, so starting to look like a beautiful meatloaf to me. So we're gonna pop that back in the oven for about another 20 minutes, and we'll do a temperature check and see how it's doing. All right, guys, so let's check this. What we're gonna look for here, guys, is between 160 and, let's see, so I can get that there, 160, 170, in that range. And we're right there, a little over 170, good enough. What we need to do is let that set for a minute and rest. We'll transfer it to a cutting board, and we'll show you what we got. So guys, we've let the meatloaf rest for a little bit, and it's ready to slice. So I put it on this cutting board, and we're gonna gently, and I use a serrated knife for this. So your bread knife, and also an electric knife is great for this. Now the end piece here, that's not gonna have any stuffing, so that's just kind of a treat. But we're gonna kind of cut in here, and you'll start to see, there's the good stuff we put in the middle. So let's cut a good couple slices here. Deeper in we go. The more cheese and prosciutto we're gonna get. I'm gonna go ahead and gingerly try to get this onto the plate. And now, perfect thing to serve with this would be some of our cauliflower mash. Just like that. With a dab of butter. Boink. And so there we have our stuffed low-carb keto meatloaf with our low-carb potato cauliflower mash. What? Oh, your mom made it with brown gravy, didn't she? You missing brown gravy? Fine, we'll make you some brown gravy. All right, so we're gonna whip up a really quick and simple gravy that just takes a few minutes. Now normally when I make a gravy or a pan sauce, I'm using some sort of pan drippings or meat drippings or some fond, but we don't have that because we were making meatloaf. So we're gonna do the best we can with what we got, but I think you'll end up liking it. So let's get started and throw this together. We're gonna start with about a tablespoon of some good butter. And we'll let that melt and finish foaming. So that'll just take a minute or two. And I've got this over medium heat in a nonstick skillet. once your butter has melted, we'll kind of let that go until the foaming goes away. And then to that, we're going to add about a teaspoon of, I use shallots with this. Shallots are kind of a, if you're not familiar with them, they're kind of like as if an onion and garlic got together and had a kid. So it's much more mild than garlic, but it's still kind of in a clove form, but it also has layers, so it's kind of cool. So we'll let the shallots soften for just about 2 or 3 minutes. And those have a nice start now. We don't want them necessarily to brown, so I turn the heat down just a little bit. And then I'm going to add, I have some, about 3 cremini mushrooms. So this will be a brown mushroom gravy. If you don't like mushrooms, leave them out, but they add a lot of flavor and a lot of texture. So we'll let those brown, and these are going to probably take 5 to, oh, probably right about 5 minutes. So we'll let these release their moisture and come back over when they're brown. You also do, before I forget, you want to add a pinch of salt. And that'll help draw that moisture out of the mushrooms. So we'll see you back here in a minute when the mushrooms have browned. So the mushrooms have taken on some color and got it again over about medium heat. Now I would normally use homemade beef bone broth. Unfortunately, I drank the last of it just before the weekend started, and I haven't made any yet. But so I just bought some beef broth. Look for the most pure ingredients that you can find and the lowest carb count. Some of them have sugar, believe it or not. I don't know why anybody put sugar in beef broth, but I looked and I found some. So we'll put a whole cup and a half in there, and we're going to let that reduce. I'm going to turn up the heat just a touch. We'll let that reduce, and we're going to hit it with some black pepper. And we'll let that reduce by about half. All right, so we've let this reduce a little bit. It's been about 5 minutes, and so the mushrooms are soft, and we need to make it thick, but we can't use a flour, we can't make a roux. We are going to use some xanthan gum. I don't know if you've worked with xanthan gum before, but it's natural, super low carb, it's all fiber. It's a natural product. You look for it in the milled goods section, you know, where you can find flours and you can find some other stuff. Comes in these little bags. It's an 8-ounce bag. It's pretty expensive, but a little goes a long way. We're going to start with about a half a teaspoon and see where we go from there. So it's just this really fine powder. And what we want to do is just gently sprinkle it. You don't want to just dump it in or it will clump up on you. So we're just going to lightly sprinkle it across the beef broth. I think I'll stop there, just see how we're doing, and then we'll give it a mix in so we don't get clumps, and we will see how we're doing on the thickness. It doesn't really have a flavor, so I haven't noticed a difference in the gravies that are flavored with this versus a roux. So it seems to work pretty good. So that's starting to thicken up. Let's put a little more in. And like any gravy, this will also get thicker when it cools. So now it's starting to thicken up, starting to tighten up a little bit. Now I don't like a super tight gravy. I like mine a little on the runny side, so you could keep adding and reducing until it's the consistency that you like. But we'll let this reduce a little bit more, but you can see it's starting to take on, right now I'd say it's somewhere between a pan sauce and a gravy. So we'll let that reduce much more. Alright guys, so this is about the consistency I like it. I didn't have to put any more xanthan gum in. We got a nice mushroom brown gravy here. This is enough for 2 or 3 or maybe 4 servings. I mean, I don't drown it in gravy. You could obviously scale this up or down as you need. So we'll go ahead and hold this and reserve it. And serve it over that meatloaf and cauliflower puree. And then you quit looking at me funny for not having brown gravy. All right, so here's the gravy we made. And we will go ahead and just spoon that right over your meatloaf and cauli mash. Now guys, keep in mind, the more of this we add, the more carbs we're adding, but this is a nice splurge. So here's our keto meatloaf with the cauli mash, with the brown gravy you asked for. Give it a try, it's awesome. Like I said, it's a little bit of work, but well worth the effort. Impress your friends. Any person not even doing keto would love this, trust me. It's gonna be awesome. We'll be back in a minute. We'll let John try it and see what he thinks. He's never had this before. All right, guys, so we're going to taste this creation. John's never had this before. He's been diligently filming me and salivating the entire time. So John, go ahead, give the meat a try, and go ahead and give some of the cauliflower a try. See what you think.
So it's not mashed potatoes. It is cauliflower.
It is cauliflower, but give it a try. See what you think.
I'm gonna get it without the gravy first.
Damn.
Tastes like garlic mashed potatoes. Nice.
I'm gonna keep eating while you're tasting. What do you think?
Tastes like gravy.
Doesn't it?
Yep.
Do you think somebody who was not keto would be able to enjoy this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is.
Already got it on my shirt. Go ahead and try that meatloaf.
All right, here we go. Get some of that cheese. What is this?
Yeah, that's provolone with prosciutto.
Oh, that's delicious.
Yeah, so again, the idea is since we're doing it low carb, we pack as much flavor in there as we can. And I guarantee you guys, you can serve this to anybody and they'll think you're a freaking rock star. Just like me.
Diamond Dave.
All right.
Cool.
All right, guys, give it a try. Let us know what you think. I think you'll love this. It's
good.
totally worth it. It's totally worth it. It really kind of super comfort food, super good. You won't even know you're being good. It'll feel like a cheat. So stay strong, keto on. Drop some comments. So,
Man, that's good, man.
yeah, dude, I've been making this meatloaf forever, and it's just, and like I said, sometimes I do it with green chilies and like Monterey Jack. And so there's no meat in there, but it's a green chili meatloaf.
Green chilies. Yeah, I can totally taste the bell pepper.
But can you taste the cabbage in there? You don't really taste the
Oh, I
cabbage.
didn't think about the cabbage.
Right, I know, it totally disappears.
What did the cabbage do?
It helped keep it moist because there's no breadcrumbs in there to keep it moist. So that and the Parmesan cheese helped kind of hold it all together.
And there's Parmesan in here?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't.
No, you're not supposed to
I'm
taste
not
it.
catching all these flavors.
It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be hidden. It's supposed to taste like
Silence! Tasting!
You wouldn't normally have Parmesan in meatloaf.
And then you have shallots in here.
Onion.
No, onion.
Onion and bell pepper.
It was this that had the garlic.
Yeah.
But the onion, it wasn't a regular onion, right?
Yeah, just a white onion.
Oh, okay. I guess I missed that.
It'll be in the video. You shot it.
It's all blurred to me.
I know. That was all in the prep work I did, and that's when I was just dumping stuff in. You know. You
Okay, probably missed it. I was probably.
Yeah. Oh, and I think I did put some raw garlic in that, but not the roast. The roast is in that, and there's some raw garlic in
That's what I wasn't sure if I was catching the garlic from here or if it was
right, and so yeah.
or in there.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I'm tasting it. You're not gonna get any, you know.
It's fine. Finish it up, dude.
Oh,
I've got that.
you do.
I'm set for the week.
I like it.
Yeah, it's been one of my favorite. Like I said, it's kind of a lot of work, but man, like I said, I got meat. You know, I got meal for a week or at least 4 days. You know, it's really good cold. It gets a little more firm cold, but I'll just grab a few slices and throw it in some Tupperware and take it to work and just eat
You
it.
ain't got time to start munching, and I do the bacon all the time. Cold bacon, man.
Oh yeah,
it's like favorite.
It's like pork jerky, man.
Yeah.
And I always make it a little on the chewier side, so it's not super crispy. But it's like
It's like having cold pizza or something.
Yeah,
it's
I
like a
love it.
totally different animal.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
I had like probably I did a half a pound of thick cut bacon, so basically a pound of bacon.
Yeah.
Ate some of it for breakfast and Ziploc bagged the rest.
Wow.
And that afternoon I'll be sitting there going, starting to get hungry, and I'll remember I got that bacon. It's yummy.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf! We want it now! The meatloaf!